The company wasn't doing well. There were a lot of layoffs, and I was one of them. I was unemployed for almost a month before I finally found a new job. Streetlight maintenance technician. Shift was 7 p.m. to midnight. It wasn't until I met the woman in white that I realized, with dawning horror, what this job really was. After I got laid off, I holed up in my apartment like a corpse, doing nothing but scrolling through job postings and firing off resumes. I burned through my phone credit and still couldn't find anything. With just 2 days to go before I'd been jobless for a full month, I was so stressed I felt like my hair was falling out. Then, 3 days ago, I got a call inviting me for an afternoon interview. Overjoyed, I cleaned myself up and headed out early. But on the way, I witnessed a traffic accident. A woman in a white dress was killed instantly, right in the middle of the road. I shuddered, then quickly muttered a God rest her soul, turning my face away from the gruesome scene. After that, I followed the address to a small diner. Looking at the place, I was confused and a little hesitant. But thinking about my dwindling bank account, I steeled myself and went inside. Whether it was washing dishes or prepping vegetables, I just needed to earn some money to get through this. Besides, nobody knew me here. I explained why I was there, and the owner just smiled at me. "You're looking for Lenny. He's not here yet. You can wait for him upstairs." I waited for about 10 minutes before a middle-aged man carrying 2 tool bags walked up to me. He nodded, handing one of the bags to me. "You must be Leo. Come on, let's get you familiar with your new workplace." I was a bit taken aback, but took the bag with a smile. "All right, I should probably mention," I added hesitantly, "I don't really know much about this line of work." He just said it was a learn-by-doing kind of job, and that he'd have me up to speed in no time. I shouldn't worry about a thing. We left the diner and walked toward the nearby North Bridge. He looked up at the street lights lining the bridge. "Your job is streetlight maintenance. This bridge is your responsibility. There are 88 lights in total. You'll come check them every night between 7 and midnight. If you find a light that's out, you open the control panel at the base of the pole and manually turn it back on. You have to get it lit. Remember this. Every single light on this bridge must be on. If 7 or more lights on the bridge go out at the same time, you must call me immediately. Memorize my number like your life depends on it. The pay is $8,000 a month, not including benefits and bonuses. If you're good with that, I'll walk you through it tonight, and you can start on your own tomorrow." When I heard $8,000 plus benefits, I immediately started nodding. Hell, in my old office job, I worked all day, sometimes pulling all-nighters, and I barely cleared $6,000 a month after killing myself. Seeing I was on board, Lenny led me back toward the diner. "From now on, the second floor of this diner is your break room," he said as we walked. "If you run into any trouble on the job, you can talk to Walt. Walt's the owner. Oh, and by the way, any food you eat at the diner while you're working is on the house." I was secretly thrilled. "Thanks, mister." "Lenny," I said. He seemed a little displeased and insisted I just call him Lenny. Lenny and I hung out at the diner until a little after 6. Then we grabbed our tool bags, hopped on the e-scooter parked out front, and rode onto the North Bridge. The sky hadn't completely darkened, but the streetlights on both sides of the bridge were already on. We parked the scooter on the service lane in the middle of the bridge. He opened the control panel on a nearby lamppost and carefully showed me how to check the wiring, the switch, and everything else. I wasn't a pro, but the work wasn't hard at all. He had me do it a few times, and he seemed satisfied with my work. Afterward, Lenny and I started walking slowly along the bridge. "Usually, the lights don't have issues before 9, he said. "The real problems start between 9 and midnight. If you see a light go out during that time, and there's someone standing under it who won't leave, if they start asking you questions, you ignore them completely. Just focus on getting the light working. Once the light is on, you just tell them, 'The light's on. You need to go.'" What he said was strange, but as I looked down at the dark, deep river below, I figured he was just worried about people trying to jump. I didn't think much of it and just nodded in agreement. A little after 10, a light on one side of the bridge flickered a few times and then went out with a pop. Lenny and I quickly walked toward it. From a distance, I could see a woman in a white dress standing under the dead lamppost, pacing with her head down. She looked anxious, like she was waiting for someone. When she saw us approach, she gave me a small smile. "Hey, handsome, I'm lost. Can you help me find my way? I was about to say something, but then Lenny's warning shot through my mind, and I swallowed the words that were already in my throat. I just gave her an awkward smile and turned to Lenny. I can fix this one. Go ahead. Lenny acted as if he hadn't seen the woman at all and just nodded at me. I skillfully opened the control panel, manually flipped the switch, and the light came back on. As I was bent over, putting the cover back on the panel, I heard Lenny's voice, cold and sharp, directed at the woman. The light's on. You need to go. The woman seemed annoyed and shot a glare at Lenny. By the time I stood up, she had already vanished into the steady stream of people on the bridge. Leo, you see that yellow line? Lenny pointed to a yellow line painted right across the middle of the bridge, his face serious. This bridge is divided in two. The lights on the south half never have problems. It's only the north half that acts up. So, you be focusing your work on the north side. If you ever find yourself in danger, you run past this line. Once you're on the other side, you'll be safe. Okay, I'll remember that. What kind of danger could there be in fixing streetlights? I figured he meant getting electrocuted or something. I didn't think too deeply about it and just nodded at him again. The next night, I was on my own. It was a little after 10 again, under the same streetlight. The woman in white was back. She smiled at me again. Hey, handsome. I'm lost. Can you help me find my way? Looking at her face, I felt a strange sense of familiarity, but I couldn't place where I'd seen her before. She said she was lost last night, and now she's saying it again tonight. Was this woman mentally ill? With that thought, I ignored her and just squatted down to work on the light. Once it was on, she stared at me with sad, resentful eyes. Handsome, can't you just help me? It's getting late. You should go home. I stepped around her and walked away quickly. I'd only taken a few steps when I heard a giggle from behind me. I didn't turn around, but I was now convinced the woman was just some lunatic. On the third night, a little after 10 again, I ran into her under the very same streetlight. Seeing her again, I felt a headache coming on. It was annoying to be pestered by a crazy person. I didn't even want to look at her as I scowled and quickly squatted down to fix the light. Handsome, we must be fated to meet. This is the fourth time. Can't you just help me find my way? The woman in white slowly crouched down in front of me. A cold aura radiated from her, sending an involuntary shiver down my spine. I don't know why, but as she got closer, I felt a strange sense of panic. My hands fumbled as I opened the control panel and quickly hit the switch. The light flickered on with a pop. Then, I hastily screwed the cover back on. As I stood up to leave, I came face to face with her. Half of her head was a bloody, mangled mess. A large flap of scalp hung down her chest. Her matted black hair caked into the blood on her clothes. She was a horrifying, blood-soaked apparition. A scream tore from my throat, pure terror seizing me. I remembered. She was the woman from the car crash I saw on my way to the interview. Handsome, help me find my way. She watched me scramble backward, my body trembling as I half fell to the ground. A sinister grin spread across her mangled face. Get lost. Suddenly, a furious roar echoed through the air, and a flash of purple light washed over her. AR, she let out a piercing shriek and then dissolved into a puff of white smoke right in front of me. Leo, you all right? That must have been a scare. It was Walt, the diner owner. He was holding a black flashlight. He came over and pulled me up from the ground. Lenny asked me to keep an eye on you for a few days. Good thing I did. The first night you saw her, you shouldn't have smiled. Last night, you definitely shouldn't have told her to go home. Didn't Lenny tell you? Once the light's on, you just tell her to go. Why bring up home? That creates a tether. That's why she was able to stick around. Walt, she's a ghost? I quit. My senses came rushing back. I threw the tool bag off my shoulder and ran for my life. A ghost? What's so scary about a ghost? You're the one who didn't follow the rules. Who can you blame for getting scared? The only thing scarier than a ghost is being broke, Leo. Go home and think it over. When you've made up your mind, come give me an answer. Walt saw me running and shouted after me, his voice filled with urgency. I fled the bridge in a panic, flagged down a taxi, and rushed home. Once I was back in my apartment, I hid under the covers, too scared to even breathe. After a terrifying night, I was jolted awake by a sharp knock on the door. It was my landlord, here to collect the rent. I reluctantly paid him, leaving my bank account with a balance in the low 3 digits. Staring at that pathetic number, Walt's words echoed in my head. The only thing scarier than a ghost is being broke. I sighed, gnawed on a stale piece of bread from days ago, and washed it down with a glass of water. After a long, agonizing internal debate, I swallowed my pride and headed back to the diner. "Leo, you're here." Seeing me, Walt smiled and led me upstairs. After I sat down, his expression turned serious. "Have you thought it through? You really want to quit? A lot of people would kill for this job, and you're thinking of walking away." "Walt, I'll stay." I said it with a pained expression. "But this job, it's not really about fixing streetlights, is it? Can you tell me what it is we actually do?" "We guide souls." Hearing that I was staying, Walt's face relaxed. "To be precise, we're soul guides. We primarily escort the souls of those who've died unjustly. Most people who die before their time are filled with resentment because their lives were cut short. They often try to pull someone else down to take their place. This bridge is a designated path to the underworld for the unjustly dead in this area. The streetlights on the bridge are both a guide and a restraint. When a light goes out, it means a soul is refusing to leave. When a soul guide like us turns the light back on, it's a way of urging them to move on. They have to go. Many of the unjustly dead have lingering attachments, things they can't let go of. They refuse to leave because they want to find a replacement to take their spot in the underworld, so they can stay in a mortal world and watch over their loved ones. But if they linger in our world for too long, their power grows, and so does their greed. That can disrupt the natural order of things. Furthermore, if they fall under the control of someone with malicious intent, the consequences could be catastrophic. So, Leo, what we do is important work that maintains the stability of society. It's an honorable job. Once you've seen more, you won't be scared anymore. Ghosts aren't really scary. In fact, some of them are quite pitiful. The truly scary thing is people. Why did you guys pick me? I asked, confused. Because you have a mean nature, which makes you perfect for this job. People in our line of work can't have too much young energy, or we'd not only fail to guide them, we'd frighten them away. Walt sighed. It was a coincidence that you found this job. Lenny's last partner passed away, so we had an opening. How did Lenny's partner die? I asked, my curiosity piqued. And where's Lenny? Anyway, are you a maintenance tech too? Lenny's partner died of an illness, Walt said. There was an incident in another district, so Lenny's covering for them. He'll be back in a few months. As for me, I am your colleague, but not a tech. You'll find out later. I asked another question. That woman in white last night, when you shined that light on her, she vanished. Did she die again? And that flashlight of yours, is it some kind of weapon? You've got a lot of questions. Walt gave a wry smile. That woman's obsession was too deep. She wouldn't leave, so I had no choice but to make her die a second time. My flashlight is pretty powerful, yes. It's enchanted with Taoist charms, but I can't give it to you. I rarely use it myself. Last night was an emergency, so I had to. He then pulled a small notebook from his pocket and handed it to me. It's still early. If you're tired, you can sleep here. If not, you should read this. It'll be very helpful. Thanks, Walt. I took the book and lay down on the sofa, starting to read. The notebook was filled with information about guiding souls. It was mysterious and fascinating, and it quickly captured my curiosity. As I read, my anxiety and fear began to fade, replaced by a strange, faint sense of anticipation for nightfall. By the time I closed the book, it was almost time for my shift. After eating a bowl of noodles Walt made for me, I slung the tool bag over my shoulder, got on the e-scooter, and rode straight onto the North Bridge. A little after 9, a streetlight suddenly went out. I walked over to it, and just as I was about to bend down, an old woman appeared in front of me. She started complaining, saying she'd left too hastily and hadn't had time to arrange her affairs. A flicker of panic went through me, but I managed to stay calm enough to open the control panel. The old woman kept chattering at me. Annoyed, I turned and spat hard on the ground beside me. It was a trick I'd learned from the notebook, though I wasn't sure what it was supposed to do. But amazingly, the old woman seemed frightened. She immediately backed away a few steps, glaring at me with resentful eyes, but she didn't say another word. I felt a surge of secret delight. I quickly hit the switch, then turned to her and said flatly, "The light's on. You need to go." Sigh. The old woman looked up at the lit lamp, sighed helplessly, and then her form flickered and vanished. Seeing her leave so easily filled me with a mix of tension and excitement. More than a dozen days passed. Almost every night, I had to send off one, sometimes several souls. Some were difficult, revealing their gruesome death wounds to try and scare me, but I was now able to handle them with composure. Walt was happy to see the change in me. Tonight, however, I ran into trouble. It was just 20 minutes before my shift ended when 5 adjacent lights went out at once. And under the dead lamps, there was nothing. As the lights died, a biting cold instantly enveloped the entire bridge. I shivered and quickly scrambled back across the yellow line. Then, I deliberately dropped my tool bag on the ground. As I bent down to pick it up, I peeked through my legs at the extinguished lights. The sight made me stumble back, nearly collapsing to the ground. Under those dead lights stood a dozen people. There were old and young, men and women, all with deathly pale faces and hollow eyes. They were grinning at me, their smiles grotesque and menacing. I took a few ragged breaths, forcing myself to calm down. My mind raced, desperately trying to recall the contents of the little book and the proper way to handle this. These were the lonely souls of those who had died unjustly years ago. They had significant power and weren't afraid of the lights or their restrictions. It wasn't that they didn't want to move on. After wandering the mortal world for so long, exposed to the elements, all they wanted was a measure of respect, a proper send-off to say goodbye to this life with dignity. And that respect meant being treated to a fine feast, a chance to share the stories of their past hardships. Whether human or ghost, anyone who wandered for that long grows tired and weary and needs someone to listen. With that in mind, I straightened up, trying my best to appear calm. I took a deep breath and stepped back over the yellow line, walking toward the empty space under the dead lights. "A feast is being held tonight," I announced. "You are all invited." "Thank you." As my words fell, the people materialized under the lights. Their voices were hollow as they spoke. Then, they began to drift toward me, bringing a wave of frigid air with them. My heart leaped into my throat as I watched them approach. As the people floated past me, a mischievous child rose up and blew a stream of cold air into my ear. Goosebumps erupted all over my skin. Mustering my courage, I turned to him with a stern face. "Don't break the rules." Seeing my cold expression, the child giggled and immediately floated on. I gasped for air, then hurried to the extinguished lights. As I worked, I marveled at how strange and useful the little book was. If the soul guide didn't give an invitation, those people could never cross the yellow line in the middle of the bridge. The yellow line divided the bridge into yin and yang. South was yang, north was yin. Without my invitation, they couldn't get past the powerful charms and wards woven into it. But a feast tonight? Where was it being held? Why didn't the little book specify an address? Yet those people all seemed to know exactly where to go. They hadn't even asked. I suddenly thought of Walt's diner. He opened late and hardly had any business during the day. And every night when I got off work, he never seemed ready to close up. Could it be Walt who was hosting the feast? I fixed the lights, checked the time on my phone. It was already past midnight. I walked over to my scooter and rode quickly to the diner. Walt seemed very busy. When he saw me, he just smiled. "Leo, head on up to the second floor and get some rest. I'll come up and find you when I'm done." Don't come down for any reason. Just wait for me upstairs." "Got it." I nodded and hurried upstairs. It seemed my guess was right. Walt was the one in charge of the feast. "Leo." I was woken by Walt's voice. It was almost 4 in the morning. I rubbed my eyes. "Walt, you all done?" "Yeah, they've all been sent on their way." Walt lit a cigarette and offered one to me. "Starting tonight, you're a true soul guide. You, me, and Lenny, we're partners. Lenny cleanses souls, you guide them, and I host the ghost feasts. In our line of work, we always operate in teams of 3. one team per district. To the outside world, you and Lenny are streetlight maintenance guys, and I'm a diner owner. I didn't understand. What do you mean, cleanses souls? And ghost feasts? Walt explained, cleansing a soul is also called purging a soul. When we encounter something really nasty and powerful, something that won't go peacefully and can't be guided away, we have to purge them. But purging sounds harsh, so we use the word cleanse instead. The word itself implies a kind of sacrifice. Besides, the goal isn't just to destroy them, it's to get them to move on peacefully. It also means dealing with any living people who might try to control these entities for their own purposes. As for the ghost feast, it's exactly what it sounds like. I prepare offerings of full spread, incense, spirit money, everything they need. We let them eat their fill, drink their fill, take their money, and go on their way. But sometimes it gets tricky. If they accept our hospitality and leave, that's great. But if they refuse the easy way and the hard way, then we have to use other methods to force them along. There are also some troublemakers who just want a free meal and have no intention of leaving. For them, my only option is to make them die a second time. When he finished, Walt handed me a solid brass flashlight. I pressed the button. The dim yellow light it cast on the floor was in the shape of a lantern. I looked at him, confused. Walt smiled. Times change, and the tools of our trade have to keep up. This isn't a flashlight. It's a soul lantern, the mark of a soul guide. In a crisis, it can stand in for a streetlight, protect the guide, and most importantly, it can even capture souls. Then, Walt warned me again that while the pay was great, we were risking our lives every night. I had to be careful from now on. I thought to myself that $8,000 a month wasn't that great. Walt was easily satisfied. It wasn't until I got my first paycheck at the end of the month that I was shocked to find out just how great the pay really was. With all the bonuses and benefits, I took home over $30,000. My God, it really was a fortune. Seeing my excitement, Walt just smirked at me. He told me that the compensation in this line of work increases over time. The longer you do it, the better the pay and benefits get. Then he turned serious again, reminding me how dangerous the job was and that I could never afford to be careless. I had been working for a month now, so I understood the risks. One small mistake could get me killed. I wanted to earn the money, but I also wanted to live to spend it, so I nodded earnestly. Time flew by. In the blink of an eye, another month had passed. I'd seen all sorts of departed souls. Those who wanted to go, those who didn't, the meek, the fierce, the old, the young men and women. In the end, I sent them all on their way. Now, in my eyes, these souls were no longer so terrifying. I found myself growing to like this job, and not just because of the money. I felt like a hero of the night, silently watching over the city. After several days of rain, the sky finally cleared up today, but the wind was still strong. It was a cold, biting wind. It was only a little after 9, but the bridge was much emptier than usual. The few people out were all hurrying along. I leaned against the railing, glanced at the new watch on my wrist, and muttered to myself, "It's 9:10. Where's Ruby?" As I said it, my eyes anxiously scanned the bridge, searching everywhere. Ruby was the ghost of a young woman who had died recently. She had amnesia when she died. She didn't even know her own name. Because she was wearing a red dress, I'd started calling her Ruby. Ruby had been wandering the bridge for several days. But every time she appeared, the streetlights were completely unaffected. I had tried to send her on her way with the soul lantern, but it never worked. Her situation baffled me, so I called Lenny to tell him about it. After listening, Lenny's tone grew serious. There are two possibilities with a case like this. One, she was murdered, and whoever killed her was afraid she'd come back for revenge, so they sealed her memory, hoping she'd become a lost, wandering spirit. The other possibility is that she was murdered for a specific purpose. Someone wanted to turn her into a powerful, vengeful ghost they could control. But she fought back, and in her struggle to escape, her soul was damaged, causing the memory loss. In her current state, it'll be hard to send her on. At the very least, she needs to remember her name before she can cross over. As they say, you live a clean life, you leave with a clean slate. She suffered a great tragedy, and there's likely a ward placed on her physical body. The fact that she was able to escape it all is probably temporary. After that, Lenny told me to watch her closely, saying he'd be back as soon as he could to handle it. If necessary, I could bring her back to Walt's diner. Finally, Lenny repeated, his voice stern, that I had to protect this woman and not let her fall into anyone else's hands. From the way Lenny spoke, I got the feeling he was leaning toward the second possibility. I had a sinking feeling that Ruby's case was far from simple. Ruby usually showed up around 8. It was now past 9, and she was still nowhere to be seen. I was getting anxious and started pacing back and forth on the bridge. It wasn't until almost 11 that Ruby finally appeared before me, looking terrified. Seeing her, I let out a long sigh of relief. "Leo, someone's hunting me." I was almost caught. Ruby grabbed my arm tightly, her eyes wide with panic and helplessness. The person, he seemed so familiar, but I'm also so scared of him. "Leo, I can't remember. I still can't remember anything. But my gut is telling me I can't go with him. Please, you have to save me. Ruby, don't be afraid. I told you, I'll protect you until you get your memory back." Her grip on my arm was like ice, sending a bone-deep chill through me that made me shiver. Just then, a white fog began to rise all around us. Within the fog, several wisps of black energy swirled, slowly closing in on the bridge. My heart tightened at the sight of the fog. Ruby looked even more terrified. She seemed to be deathly afraid of it, her body trembling visibly. Seeing her state, I quickly pulled the soul lantern from my tool bag. "Ruby, get in here, quick. I'll let you out when it's safe." "Okay." She nodded frantically, and in a flash of light, her form was drawn into the lantern. I watched the fog warily. The black energy was swallowing the white, and soon the entire mass of fog had turned a dark gray. In the glow of the streetlights, I could just make out the entire bridge being enveloped by the thick, gloomy mist. A faint, foul stench, both metallic and chilling, rose from the fog. This wasn't natural. Someone was doing this, and they were likely after Ruby. I quickly turned on my phone's flashlight and hurried along the service lane to the center of the bridge. I found a yellow line and stood on it, facing north. Then, holding my phone in one hand and clutching the soul lantern in the other, I stared into the darkness ahead, my heart pounding, not daring to even breathe. After about 10 minutes, a faint sound drifted out of the gray fog in front of me, the wail of Swona horns. My heart hammered against my ribs. As the horns wailed, a procession of figures began to emerge from the mist. At the very front was an old man, dressed in white, his body hunched over, his back bent severely. He carried a white paper lantern painted with bizarre patterns. The lantern looked old and battered, and a strange green flame flickered within it. By the light of his lantern, I was shocked to see what was behind him. A coffin, blood red, so vibrant it looked as if it might start dripping. The pallbearers were a group of middle-aged men with eerie smiles plastered on their faces. Their faces, like their white clothes, were deathly pale, without a trace of color. The mourners following them, however, were all very young. But what was truly bizarre was that they were all wearing bright red shoes. Even the old man's feet were clad in a pair of jarringly red shoes. The procession was long and elaborate, but it moved with excruciating slowness, as if inching its way forward. Paper money filled the air, fluttering on the night wind. The sound of the horns seemed to have grown fainter now, raspy and grating. The sight sent a wave of goosebumps over my skin, and cold sweat streamed down my back. I was scared, terrified, but my rational mind told me I couldn't show it. The consequences would be severe. If I wanted to live, I had to tough it out. A soul guide has a righteous aura we're not so easy to kill. But if you're not careful, you'll get yourself killed. So, I forced myself to calm down. Stay calm. Stay calm. Stay calm. Just hold on. As long as I don't show fear, as long as I don't step off this yellow line, I can get through this. But just then, from behind me, came the cheerful, festive sound of gongs and drums. My heart shot into my throat. Cold sweat ran down my face. Fighting the urge to tremble, I whipped my head around to look behind me. In the distance, another procession of blurry figures was slowly approaching me. Leading this group was a beautiful young woman. She was dressed in red, her black hair pinned up high. She carried a red lantern, which cast a dim, yellow glow. By the light of her lantern, I could once again see through the fog. Behind her was a sedan chair, stark white. The chair bearers and the musicians were all young women. They were all dressed in red, their faces pale and menacing. But what was truly strange was that they were all wearing white shoes. Suddenly, the gongs and the horns both blared to life again. They were closing in on me from both sides, the cacophony of their instruments so piercing it made my breath catch in my chest. I clutched the soul lantern, standing sideways on the yellow line, my eyes darting nervously between the two processions. This looked like the legendary twin phantoms, but not quite. There was very little life force in either group, only a heavy aura of death. If I wasn't mistaken, the only living people in these two processions were the old man and the beautiful woman. I was standing on the yellow line. Even if they reached me, they couldn't hurt me. My best bet was to wait and see what they were planning. I'd seen some things by now. I was terrified, but I was also calm enough. No matter how powerful that thing is, most of its power over people comes from fear. As they say, fear creates its own demons. Even though this was my first time seeing something like this, as long as I stayed calm, I doubted they'd dare to attack me directly. I was a soul guide. Walt said that for most spirits, messing with one of us was a death wish. Besides, Walt's diner wasn't far from the bridge. With a disturbance this big, there was no way it would escape his notice for long. Young man, our master's plans have changed. We need to get to the other side of the bridge for the burial. I'm asking you to say the word and let us pass. I'd be much obliged. The old man with the lantern stopped about 10 paces north of the yellow line and bowed to me. Young man. Before I could answer, the beautiful woman behind me spoke up. Our master is going to the north side of the bridge to welcome his bride. I'm asking you to say the word and let us pass. I would be in your debt. The woman in red curtsied in the traditional style. I shot a cold glare at each of them. Don't break the rules, I said, my face a mask. I'm not a pushover. So ungrateful. You'd rather do this the hard way. The old man's face darkened, clearly unhappy with my response. The beautiful woman seized the opportunity. If he's not grateful, then he must prefer the hard way. He, just a rookie soul guide, and he talks so tough. Both of you get lost. I knew with absolute certainty that they couldn't cross the yellow line without my permission, which gave me the confidence to shout at them like that. You think a mere yellow line can stop me? The old man was furious now, his face contorted. He reached out and snatched a man in white from behind him, pulling him forward in the blink of an eye. Then, he shoved the man toward the yellow line. At the same time, the beautiful woman behind me did the exact same thing. As the man and woman they'd pushed hurtled toward the line, two piercing screams ripped through the air. A cloud of white smoke erupted from the yellow line. The smoke carried a pungent, foul smell, nauseatingly similar to the stench from the fog earlier. Then, they quickly began shoving more of their followers toward the line. As the screams continued, my own expression grew grim and terrified. They were trying to force their way across the yellow line. How was I supposed to stop them? What could I do? What could I do? Was I just supposed to stand here and watch? Just as they each pushed their eighth person forward, the old man suddenly stopped. He shot me a sinister grin. 7 up, 8 down. Perfect. 8 men and 8 women. It's done. Ha ha ha. As I stood there in shock, the beautiful woman also began to laugh. 8 down, the ward is broken. It doesn't matter where that little bitch is hiding now, we'll find her. She can't escape. Were they talking about Ruby? I was about to say something when the white sedan chair suddenly lifted into the air and shot straight toward the red coffin. The coffin also rose to meet it. It looked like they were about to cross the line, but then something strange happened. The red coffin landed perfectly in the center of the yellow line, and the white sedan chair landed precisely on top of it. I felt the soul lantern in my hand begin to shake violently. I gripped it tighter, my heart pounding in my chest, terrified that something would happen to Ruby. But just then, a brilliant light shone down, followed by a familiar voice roaring, "You dare cause trouble on my turf? You've got a death wish." As the voice faded, a wide beam of intense purple light washed over the bridge. Under the light, the coffin and the sedan chair exploded with a loud bang. As they shattered, all of those people collapsed to the ground, dissolving into puffs of white smoke with agonized screams, their ashes scattering in the wind. The thick fog covering the bridge instantly dispersed. In the light of the street lamps, I looked at the debris scattered on the ground and was shocked to see that the sedan chair and all those people were made of paper. Those paper effigies had been able to lift such a heavy-looking coffin. This old man was more powerful than I thought. The old man was now bleeding from the corner of his mouth, stumbling back a dozen steps before he could steady himself. Blood was pouring from his feet, leaving a long trail on the ground. The beautiful woman was in no better shape. She coughed up a large mouthful of blood and scrambled toward the old man. But as she ran, her feet also began to bleed. She seemed to be in immense pain, collapsing to the ground before she could reach him, clutching her legs and screaming as she dragged herself backward. "Lenny, you're back." Seeing Lenny, a wave of post-traumatic relief washed over me. "Yeah." Lenny glanced at me, a small smile touching his lips before turning his attention to the old man. "The Twin Phantom's soul-snatching ritual. You got some skills. You're the one who killed that girl, aren't you? You went to all this trouble just to control her. What did she ever do to you?" "Oomph." The old man shot Lenny a hateful glare and then began rapidly forming hand signs, apparently trying to heal himself. "Leo, let the girl out," Lenny said, casting a dismissive look at the old man before turning back to me. "His trick looks like the Twin Phantoms, but it's actually for soul snatching. It's mainly used to forcibly capture the souls of unmarried young men and women. The girl is young, not yet married. The sedan chair and the coffin are both things she would have experienced in her life, one way or another. So, they have a powerful lure for her. Good thing you were quick on your feet and hit her. Otherwise, she would have been irresistibly drawn to their call and taken by force. Breaking this thing is simple. All you have to do is stand on the yellow line and hold down the button on your soul lantern until the line channels its power into the lantern and turns the light purple. They wouldn't have been so cocky then. Or you could have picked any streetlight on this bridge, pulled a wire out of your soul lantern, and connected it to the light. That would have wiped them out too. It's that simple." I asked, stunned. "Yep, that's simple. A place as important as this bridge has secrets hidden everywhere. That old man has some skills, but his methods are outdated. We keep up with the times. They can't compete." Lenny looked at me with a smug little smile. "Leo, her. She seems so familiar." As soon as Ruby was out of the soul lantern, her gaze fell on the beautiful woman across the way. A look of pained confusion crossed her face. "It's okay. If you can't remember, I'll help you. I'll restore your soul and bring back your lost memories." Lenny walked over to Ruby and said to me, "Leo, watch closely. Soul restoration is simple for us. You just need a drop of blood from the tip of your tongue. Smear it on her forehead. Then press the button on the soul lantern twice and shine it on her. We have Yin natures, but the blood from the tongue is pure Yang. This combination of Yin-born and Yang blood is the key to restoring a soul." As he spoke, Lenny skillfully applied a drop of his own blood to Ruby's forehead. I quickly pressed the soul lantern's button twice and shined it on her. AR, the moment I turned off the lantern, Ruby let out a blood-curdling scream. A powerful, cold wind whipped up around her. Her long hair flew out in all directions, revealing a face twisted into a terrifying, sinister mask. The temperature on the bridge plummeted, and all the streetlights flickered violently. "Ruby, you. My name isn't Ruby. It's Chloe. I'm the only daughter of Mr. Cross, the businessman from the east side of town." Chloe cut me off, her eyes burning with hatred as she stared at the woman on the ground. "Haley, you came from some backwater town in the mountains. I paid for your education, brought you to the city, and got you a job at my dad's company. You were my best friend, my sister. And what did you do? You didn't just sleep with my boyfriend. You conspired with him to murder me. And you were even going to use my soul to try and steal my father's company. Are you even human? After everything I did for you, this is how you repay me? Oomph. No good deed goes unpunished. You deserved it. Haley glared back at Chloe, her face twisted with malice. Chloe, you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth, but are you prettier than me? I'm better than you in every way. Why should I have to live in your shadow? All these years, I sucked up to you, terrified you'd suddenly cut me off. Now, I wanted your boyfriend, and he wanted me. He tried to break up with you, but you wouldn't let him, so we had to kill you. And your family is just so rich, we figure we might as well get a little something out of it. They say every man for himself. Ha ha ha. I helped you, and you grew to hate me for it? If you like my boyfriend, you should have just told me. He's just a man. I would have given him to you. Why did you have to take my life? Chloe suddenly burst into tears, her sobs racked with grief. And tell you? How could I? I still wanted to keep milking you for all you were worth. Haley sneered, laughing viciously. Ha 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 ha. Chloe, I'm so glad you're dead. Even if I don't get a dime, I'm still so happy. I've wanted to kill you for years. Why were you the one born into a life of luxury? Chloe shot Haley a furious look, then turned and knelt before Lenny. Sir, I died a horrible, unjust death. You're a powerful man. Please, let me take over her body and live again. I can give you money, anything you want, just name your price. Lenny's reply was cold. Everyone has their own fate. We soul guides only guide souls. Suddenly, a sinister laugh cut through the air. A gleaming dagger appeared from behind Haley's neck. Before Lenny or I could react, the old man swiftly and viciously slit Haley's throat. You dared to kill someone right in front of me. Lenny's face instantly darkened, and he stared at the old man with a chilling expression. Doesn't a woman as wicked as this deserve to die? The old man sneered at Lenny. It's just a shame. I originally wanted this Chloe girl's soul. She's from a wealthy family, and her soul is remarkably pure. I've done many things that go against the heavens, and my body has suffered a severe backlash. I'm only in my 40s, but I look like this, and my back is so bent. I was hoping to use this girl's soul to concoct a pill to reverse the damage, to heal my back. But who would have thought she'd be willing to damage her own soul to escape? But I couldn't give up. I figured a newly departed soul wouldn't have anywhere else to go but here, so I watched for a few days. And when I saw this old guide was just a kid, I decided to take a gamble. I just didn't expect someone so powerful to show up halfway through. At this, the old man let out a triumphant laugh. If I didn't kill this wicked woman, how else was I supposed to escape from you? Hey. As he spoke, he began rapidly drawing something in the air with his blood-stained hands. Seeing his frantic gestures, Lenny started to rush forward to stop him, but then came a series of pop sounds as a dozen streetlights on one side of the bridge suddenly went out. Leo, fix the lights now. Lenny's words had barely left his mouth when a thick black fog rose up on the bridge. I fumbled to turn on my soul lantern, but Chloe spoke urgently. Leo, don't let that old man get away. I'll go after him. Turn on your soul lantern after I'm gone. If you turn it on now, I'll have to cross over. But I can't accept that. I have to bring that old man back. But I looked up. The old man was indeed gone. I hesitated, unsure of what to do. His business is not your concern. You just focus on crossing over. Lenny turned to me, his face grim. Leo, I'll chase the old man. You just fix the lights. Now, send this girl on her way. Immediately. With that, he took off, running north into the darkness. Chloe, unwilling to give up, pleaded with me again. Leo, that old man is very powerful. Your friend might not be a match for him. Let me go too. Chloe, I'm sorry. I can't. I cut her off. Now that you remember who you are, it's time for you to go. That's the rule. It can't be broken. I know why you're saying this. You can't let it go. You want to stay in the world of the living, and I can't allow that. Leo, Chloe knelt before me, sobbing. Please, just let me go back and see my parents one last time. I'm their only child. Leo, I'm begging you. I promise I'll be back in half an hour, tops. Sigh, be quick about it. Thinking about her tragic death and seeing her crying so pitifully, my heart softened. I sighed, turned, and walked toward the extinguished lights. Thank you, Leo, Chloe whispered through her tears. I got one of the dead lights and quickly switched on my soul lantern, my hands fumbling as I worked. With so many lights out, the fog on the bridge grew thicker and heavier. The sinister, cold air seeped into my very bones. I was sweating, my hands and feet trembling uncontrollably. Leo, stay calm, don't panic. I'm here. After what felt like an eternity, Walt's voice suddenly called out. In the light of my soul lantern, I saw Walt driving a 3-wheeled flatbed truck. On the back was a portable altar, complete with a pig's head, a sheep's head, a rooster, and other offerings. Walt, you're finally here. Seeing him, I felt a wave of relief, and my hands stopped shaking so much. With this many lights out, I had to come. We can't let anything from down below get out. Walt parked the truck and immediately got to work. He lit some incense and bowed, then took out a small, yellow triangular flag. He began walking in a strange pattern, his eyes sharp as he scanned our surroundings. It took me a long time, but I finally got all the lights working again. The fog on the bridge dissipated, and Walt let out a long sigh of relief. Then, he took the pig's head and all the other offerings and threw them into the river. Hey, where's Haley's body? I looked at the empty spot on the bridge, and my face fell. What's wrong? Seeing my expression, Walt grew tense. I told him what had happened with Chloe. Walt listened, then sighed helplessly. Leo, you were tricked. Chloe must have possessed Haley's body while you weren't looking so she could get her revenge. She's going to kill someone. She's definitely going after her boyfriend. I immediately panicked. Walt, what can I do to stop her? Is there any way to fix this? It's too late. We can't catch her now. Walt shook his head. She died in a red dress. She's a vengeful one, hard to find. It was an emergency tonight, and you were distracted. It's not your fault. Forget it. We'll deal with it when she comes back. Sigh. I never should have felt sorry for her. I was blaming myself. Chloe had seemed like such an honest girl. I couldn't believe she'd tricked me. You should never trust the words of a ghost. Let this be a lesson for you. Walt seemed to read my mind. He patted my shoulder. Leo, don't beat yourself up. For the short time you've been doing this, you're already doing great. Besides, that boyfriend of hers had it coming. It's just a shame he'll die by her hand. But karma is karma. It all comes full circle in the end. Let her be. After my shift, I didn't go home. I waited with Walt at the diner for Lenny to return. He came back very late, around 3 in the morning. He had dispersed the old man's soul. Knowing the old man was gone for good was a relief. I told him what happened with Chloe. Lenny just looked at me calmly. She's a soul. She can't run for long. Forget it. You've only been on the job for a few months. Experience takes time to build. Just be more careful in the future. Don't be so quick to fall for their stories. I nodded quickly. Then, Lenny left again that same night. Before he left, he said he'd be back for good in about a month. The next night, I sent off the soul of a handsome young man. He had Chloe's aura on him. It must have been her boyfriend. But I didn't see Chloe. I was worried Chloe would continue to live in that body, hurting innocent people. After all, she had begged Lenny to let her do just that, right in front of me. After work, I told Walt about my concerns. Walt didn't seem too worried. He just said she was being naive. For the unjustly dead to possess a living body, there's a price to pay, and it's a price she couldn't afford. She'll be back, he said. It wouldn't be long. Would she come back? I waited for many days, but I never saw her again. I couldn't let it go. I had let a soul escape. Even though Walt and Lenny never blamed me, I still felt like a failure. As a soul guide, I'd let a soul get away. It was a stain on my record. I swore to myself that I would never again be foolish enough to trust the words of a ghost.